Welcome to the 2023 Leading Transformational Change Forum this year. You're joining us for Transforming Organizations Through Pay Transparency with our speaker, Jennifer Green. I'm Suzanne Levy, president of Boulder Leadership here in Boulder, Colorado, by way of the Northeast. I'm an executive and leadership coach and have been coaching leaders for over 25 years. Today, Jennifer will take us through for about 25 minutes. If we have time at the end, we'll be answering some questions. So to introduce Jennifer, excuse me, Jennifer Green is the managing principal of Green Global Resources. Jennifer has been in the corporate head of Total Rewards role most of her career for tech companies in Silicon Valley. And since 2018, she has been advising a variety of clients in different industries and of varying cultures, geographies, and sizes. The change approach is the same, the change impact varies. But every company is unique as to how work gets done, openness, trust in management, and compensation program design. Jennifer is passionate about building pay programs, helping companies implement pay transparency, and designing sales compensation plans with a change management approach. From development through implementation, change strategies help companies achieve a successful outcome, employee perceptions of fair pay. The research shows that fair pay impacts favorably on retention and trust in management. Few companies are prepared for the organizational change impact of pay transparency. Today, you'll learn how to assess if your company is ready and hear real-life examples of 3 change strategies that can ensure successful outcomes. By aligning leadership, customized communications, and having clear goals and success criteria, companies can move the needle on employee engagement and retention. So Jennifer, I'll let you take it away.
Great. Thank you, Suzanne, for that very nice introduction. Very detailed. Yes, we are going to talk about the 4 elements that I believe we need to cover today to implement successfully pay transparency. We're really talking about a cultural shift. This is major. And even, such icons as John and Steve Radford, who I've talked about this topic very recently, who are the market leaders created the Radford Network and job architecture, say that this is a cultural differentiator for companies. This is huge, but it's also something we can do. Okay, we've done it to varying degrees in our companies in the past. But we're going to talk about building the foundation for pay transparency, job architecture very briefly. The rest is really the change management approach and model, which I know many of you as change management practitioners are familiar with. So this is going to sound, I think, very familiar to you. And finally, we'll close on a call to action, what we need to do to get ready for pay transparency, which is the new normal. So what are the kinds of questions that employees are asking now? What is pay transparency? It is all about job worth. It is all about what my pay position should be. And am I really paid fairly, right? So those are the kinds of questions that are coming up because jobs ranges are being posted. So whether you're in California, which requires posting jobs with job ranges, that's part of pay transparency and reporting by gender and by minority status and by age, what you're paying people with, our state labor department. Whether you're in California, whether you're in another state, Colorado, or Europe, all of these fair pay laws are impacting you. Now, in states, right now, I think we have 9 states that have implemented it and 13 others that are considering it. So whether you're in a state that has implemented pay transparency or not, you're going to implement it because it's the right thing to do. It makes it much more too complex to implement pay ranges in some states and not others because questions will be asked. So the culture shift that we're going to talk about and how to effectively manage that is what is below the surface, right? We know transparency is about trust, openness, but without authenticity, it's empty. In fact, it can be extremely damaging if you implement without doing your homework first. So whether you're in an organization that is very secret about pay, or at the other extreme, you've been very open about it in the past, you're going to have some degree of cultural shift. Less if you've been open about pay and pay ranges, and if you have your market pricing and your job architecture in place and your manager's own compensation, less of the cultural shift. It's really upskilling or training to answer all of the myriad questions that are coming at managers today. But if you are, if you don't have your house in order, so to speak, if you don't have your job architecture and your market pricing done, and you know what your jobs are worth, and you're posting those and you're answering, those questions, then you have a major readiness aspect. And we're going to talk about that because the magnitude of the change in your cultural shift is going to be huge. Now, that's not that it's it can't be done. It can be done. It just might take a little bit more preparation. So why is it important to know how pay transparency impacts your specific organization? It's because pay transparency impacts management trust. Employees trust managers when they're transparent about pay. The research shows that. World of Work just published something in September about that, and after conducting some research. And management trust impacts retention favorably. So John Radford has said recently, and this was quoted in an Aon webinar session I attended earlier this week, think of pay transparency as a cultural differentiator. So it's part of your employer value proposition. So candidates are looking for those job ranges being posted, and employees are looking for answers to questions. So preparation is what it is all about. So you prepare by doing what I believe to be 4 things. And that is starting with job architecture and job worth based on market, aligning your leadership about, what you're going to be communicating, right? What is it? Is it just pay ranges, or is it decisions about pay? Is it your merit increase matrix and what your potential is? Or is it simply posting ranges and putting together an FAQ and expecting managers to, be able to communicate that and answer questions? Whatever it is, leadership are really going to be the role models for the behaviors that they want throughout the organization, down to the first line manager. They're going to have to explain it to their employees. Those people that report to them are going to ask these questions. So all of that requires some work. Communications and training, of course, are consistent and yet customized. So you have support groups like HR business partners that might be involved in the training. So they need a different communications and but that needs to be consistent with what your leaders have bought into, right? So from their leadership team through your mid-level managers to your support groups like IT, because systems may be impacted, to HR business partners, consistency and yet customization to what their role is, clearly. And then having clear outcomes, your desired outcomes, as change management practitioners, you need to be clear about what the future state is, right? If managers are going to own compensation decisions in the future and answer these questions, then getting them there along the way, you need to see what you need to adjust in your training plan to get them to that point where they feel comfortable answering these questions. Managers don't want to talk to employees about their pay. That's probably one of the most uncomfortable conversations, in addition to performance, which usually is accompanying that conversation, that is difficult for managers to do. So they need that role modeling from their leaders, and they need that training, hands-on, and information and tools to do their job. So here, what is job architecture anyway? So it's simply levels and job families. This is sort of a high-level view of maybe where you would start. What is your leadership team going to look like in terms of levels? And how many levels are you going to have? And where do you start to see individual contributors on a dual ladder with leaders? This is pretty typical of a tech organization, where you have a principal level or a scientist level or an architect level at a director or senior manager level. And then you have your individual contributors and who are in support roles, whether they're consultants or subject matter experts or their customer service. So this is sort of that idea. And then, of course, job worth market pricing is extremely important. But you can't do that until you have your job architecture figured out, because that will be, of course, how you benchmark your jobs against industry and pull the information for which you will be designing salary ranges. The salary ranges today are much narrower than they used to be. We're not talking 50% spreads, we're talking 20 to 30%, because they're very, very much more precise. And in the past, we combined a lot of jobs in those 50% range spreads. But now we have to be much more precise, because there is fair pay involved and less differences between people's pay that are in similar roles. So we're getting a lot more exacting, but so is the data. So the change management model, I think most of you are familiar with, but it applies in this case, whether you have a very small shift in culture or a degree of magnitude of the shift in culture that you need to manage. So know, of course, what the change impact is on your organization. It's really about people, process, and systems or technology. So how many systems are impacted? How many processes are impacted? How many people in your organization are impacted, of course, is one measure of the change. Pay transparency really impacts everyone in the organization. Whether or not you decide to implement pay ranges in states where you don't have compliance requirements, it still has an impact. You still have to tell people that it's either coming or you're impacting it only in those states where it's required. So that impact has to be measured, and that gives you an idea of where you want to spend your time. Leadership alignment, we've talked about a little bit, touch base on that, as well as communicating, of course, and training everyone in your stakeholder groups, right? Right message at the right time to each stakeholder group, whether it's your leadership team or it's your support group, consistent and customized. And then, of course, having desired outcomes so that you can measure, plan, execute, and improve along the way. And know when you've gotten to your destination, of course. So a best practice tip, of course, is that make the conversation not just coming from the HR organization, right? If there really is support by the leadership team, which is necessary for this to happen at all, you must get them involved in walking the talk and in presenting and role modeling the kind of behavior that they expect in the organization. So we've talked a little bit about that. Now, whether you have, again, your structure of your organization, whether you're centralized or decentralized, will really impact on how difficult this is. How much coordination do you need involving decentralized divisions or subsidiaries where they're used to being, doing their own thing? They might have been acquired, they might not have the same structure. That's a more difficult situation than if you are very centralized and you don't have various organizations that haven't, that are not on the same page, right? And clearly, if your leaders are not aligned, that's a bigger concern, and that's something that you're going to have to work on. And then, of course, impact on systems, your competitive market position. Today, many experts will say there's a good amount of the organization that may need an adjustment, but you clearly, we're not talking about, 10, 20, 50%. We're talking about 2 or 3% per year will need some sort of adjustment. But measuring that gap is important to know how much of a budget you're going to need. So leadership alignment, as I mentioned, is very important. You need to identify what will be shared, and that needs to be decided from the very top down through the organization. Everybody has to buy into that, right? Are we just going to, again, share pay ranges, or is it going to be about pay decisions and how employees can advance their pay? So you determine the content and approach and the order of the communications. You wouldn't start at the bottom, you would start at the top, right? Okay, we know this. Communications and training, of course. So it's not enough, again, that your chief HR officer and your HR teams are talking about this. You need your leaders to, in fact, be the ones that role model the behavior and talk about it. Here's an example of just a quick snapshot of a plan, a strategy and a plan for communicating to stakeholders and identifying, of course, your champions, who are typically your directors, your change agents, or your managers, your first line managers. They're the ones that are really going to have to sit down and answer the questions and present the information to a larger group of employees, but all down the chain. Everyone has a responsibility in this communication. And down to, who's going to prepare the content, who's going to approve it. I think many of you have spent some time creating those plans. Then, of course, talking about clear outcomes and measures. If you are, in fact, going to improve employees' perception of their pay and their trust in management, then you have to give them the information that they need through their manager. And if the result, the outcome that you're looking for is a higher level of trust and retention, then there are steps along the way, obviously. So from current state to future state, having those changes articulated with your leadership team and getting agreement on what that impact is and what your success metric and goal is that process that aligns your leaders around what it is that they're going to be sharing and why. So last but not least, the call to action is, I think it's real. It's not going away. We're going to have to set up a plan and execute on that plan and understand what elements go into successfully implementing, and that this is a major culture shift. So from job architecture through leadership alignment and communications and training, and having clear outcomes and success metrics along the way, I think you can do this. I know it's doable. I've done it several times before over the last 2 or 3 years. And then we, did this in tech. So I think tech has probably been the leader in the market in terms of that. But many other industries are getting very involved in this now. So thank you. And I'll open it up to questions at this point. Suzanne?
Yes, great. Thank you so much. So illuminating, I want to say. I have a major question for you. I also have my own personal question, which I hadn't posed with you prior, but let's first ask this one. If there's one main important lesson learned about leading transformational change that you really want participants to take away, what's that one nugget that you'd want them to have?
So I think that the real key is to take the time on the front end to assess the problem, so to speak, the impact of the change on your culture and on your organization, to people, process, and technology. So, are people's roles and behaviors going to be changed? Yes. Managers are going to have to own compensation, right? Decisions and communications. Are processes going to be impacted? Yes. You have an applicant tracking candidate system that not only is a system, but is a process. So, and actually it's a benefit for candidates to know what the ranges are before they apply for a position. So there's a lot of benefits to this. But you just need to think through, okay, where is this information? What tools are being used and what systems are being impacted? And that has to be part of your plan.
Yeah, so and I'm hearing the longevity. It's like a real commitment that people have to make and stick with it and learn and train. I have a completely different question for you.
Sure.
Do you notice any difference generationally in terms of, people who, for most of their career, there was not pay transparency, and maybe a younger generation that expects different change and kind of has that expectation of, you're going to take care of me differently?
Yeah.
What do you know?
Yeah, definitely. And I have a story to tell too. I have a close relationship with an individual who's in her early 40s, working for a state superintendent of schools. Won't tell you which school system it is. And she had a problem with the fact that there were two males that were hired after her with less experience, less degrees. She had a degree from Harvard, a master's from Harvard, and she was paid less than them, and they were just hired. So she went to her boss and she says, I think I'm underpaid in relation to these two people. I think there's a problem there. And her boss said, well, there's nothing I can do about it, but you can certainly talk to our finance head about this. I think if you're concerned about it, that your finance head might be the finance head for the superintendent of schools may be able to answer your questions. So she made the appointment. She went, she talked to that person who wasn't really prepared to address the question because she looked up the information on her computer as they were talking and said, oh my gosh, there is a problem, but I can't do anything about it because you're on contract. So when that contract year came up the following summer, lo and behold, there was no change in her compensation. So she left the organization. So it's an expectation, and it does directly, impact on people's willingness to stay and trust. So anyway, yeah. Hope that answers your question.
It does, because I think across the board, we have to pay attention to every generation in an organization because there's assumptions and we need to learn about each other and how that's going to work.
Yeah.
And is there anyone from your experience of having companies do that, any watch outs, any big lessons learned? You saw a company where they followed the path and they learned some really big lessons because maybe they strayed from your consultation in some way.
Well, yes. And I would say this, I had a client who decided to implement it first for the sales organization because that's where the highest rate of concern was. Not only because they directly impact revenue, but because there was some attrition going on. So they implemented it with their sales organization first. Well, the other employees in production and G&A, of course, learned of this and wondered, what about me? Why not? What's going on? Over in sales, they're getting all the attention, they're getting all the information that they need. And I don't still know what my salary range is. So that was a difficult thing. And I weren't really prepared to address that.
Yeah. So it sounds like they have to really think holistically, think under the rocks, behind the curtains of what could happen. And the messaging is clearly very critical.
Yes.
Consistent messaging.
Yeah.
We have a couple minutes, and is there anything else that is coming up for you that you'd like to share? Any last words of wisdom before we wrap up?
Well, I think the secret sauce to all of this, whether you're internally consulting to your organization about this or externally, is to really collaborate and co-create this whole process, from job architecture and market pricing through implementation with management training. Really work shoulder to shoulder with your stakeholders and bring them along in that process. And I think that will pay off dividends for you, and you'll get your return on your investment.
Great. Jennifer, thank you so much for today. People can reach out to you, I believe, and ask more questions. Is that correct?
Yes,
And
definitely.
your website is greenglobalresources.com. And
Yes.
thank you for providing all of your expertise with us today.
Thank you, Suzanne. It was my pleasure and my honor.
Thank you.